Jim and Will. What have they been watching lately? They're husky, hairy, huggable homos. Movie Bears Podcast.
Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears Podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and most weeks, work has been a little crazy for us lately, but most weeks, we love to review movies either current or classic, all with a lovable queer bear twist on this show. Sometimes we have a cavalcade of guest friends who join us of all genders, sexualities, some crazy, amazing people, with episode 500 coming up in like a month, I think. Who knows who we'll see pop up to help us celebrate the big 500. But for now, you're on episode 497 of the Movie Bears Podcast. And on this episode, we are going to be reviewing Andrew Haig's All of Us Strangers. If you listened to our top 10 films of 2023 last week, of course, relative to when we're recording, you may have heard us talk a little bit about that film. I won't spoil you on who had that on their list or where that ended up, just in case you go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already. But it was a movie that we felt strongly enough about that we're like, you know what? Let's dedicate an episode to it and talk about it. So we got a lot to discuss there. I can't wait to get into it. But before we do, let me introduce you to my wonderful co-hosts. Jim Pugliafico is with us as usual.
Right.
And we're so glad that you're here, babe. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Better now that we get to come together again in this forum to talk about another new movie. Last week was amazingly fun with our top 10s. So yeah, if you're listening to this and want to hear our top 10s, which is each of us got to do a top 10, go back and check that out. But this week we got another new movie to talk about. And I'm really excited for this one.
Mm-hmm. Me too. And your verbiage, Jim, there was great. I love it when we get to come together as well. That's always such a fun time. Always good.
Yes.
And glad you can be part of that, of course. The other wonderful person who gets to be part of that sesh is, of course, William Lindis. Hey, Will, how the hell are you?
Doing fantastic. I'm always a big fan of, and I apologize if y'all can hear sirens going
Better
by in the
hide, Will.
background. Yeah. They're coming for me. Yeah, that's always the fun part of taking yourself off mute to say hi. No, it's fantastic. I always, like we say almost every week, this episode of this recording, it's one of the highlights of my week. I know it is for you two as well. And I just love being able to talk about movies that we love with each other and with our listeners and just being able to spend this time together. And I'm especially excited to spend some more time talking about this movie. This is one that we all had when we did our episode last week, like you mentioned. We had so many things to say about it, but we had so little time. We had so many movies to talk about that we really had to truncate our thoughts and our feelings down to just a few minutes. So now we can just sort of let all those thoughts fly. I'm excited for it.
Indeed. It's nice to have some room to really let this discussion marinate, simmer, bake. I don't know what kind of cooking or baking analogy you want to use. I think they all apply. But yeah.
Who here is our best chef?
Simmer.
Jim.
Simmer.
That would be Jim.
Jim. Okay. What is
famous.
the cooking analogy for this?
Marinate.
Okay.
Ooh.
Marinate.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
As opposed
next
to
time-
soaking, it's marinating.
Oh no. We're not going to go there.
That's a different.
Will,
Yeah.
next time you're in Tucson, or even if we get a chance in Austin, I don't know if you have a grill, but Jim has the best like marinade. I know you are not a meat eater, but maybe he could marinate
Grilled
some
veggies,
vegetables or
veggies,
something
baby.
for you.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, that even gets me to eat vegetables, and that's saying
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So, put
Oh,
that
yeah,
in your head.
We got the grill, the briquettes, all of that stuff. So yeah, come on down. We got it.
Perfect. All right. Well, as both Jim and Will mentioned, we talked a little bit about All of Us Strangers on last week's episode didn't have all of the room, all of the time that we wanted to really devote to that. So super cool that we have that opportunity now. We'll go ahead and just tell you up front, we're going to follow our usual format when we dedicate a show to a single movie like this. So if you haven't seen All of Us Strangers yet, that is completely okay. We're going to talk about the movie for probably about 10 minutes or so, completely spoiler free. Unlike other shows that are like, we're not going to do any spoilers at all, but like, here's how the movie ended. We don't do that. We protect you. We believe in not ruining your experience. And this one's an important one as queer media goes. We don't want to do anything to taint that experience for you. So we'll make sure that you get to go in as unsullied as possible, but we will give fair warning before we open things up to spoilers. I will ramble awkwardly for at least a whole minute to give you time to hit the pause button, skip ahead, whatever you need to do, depending on if you're watching or listening live or enjoying the show through the magic of digital tape delay on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So all that said, all of that done, all of that completed, Jim, Will, are you ready to jump into our movie discussion?
Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely ready.
Yeah, I think we were both looking for an on the spot pun, and it didn't happen. So, yeah.
Listen, after how many years have we been? 12? 12, right?
Yeah.
That's 12 to 20. Yes, 12. After 12 years of punning at you all the time, I can still surprise you a little bit.
Yeah. So I think
okay.
it's okay. Yeah. So I guess let's all of us move to the next section.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're no strangers to the format that we're following. So there you go. Are you happy? Are you happy? You got some puns. Okay. All right. Here we go. Our discussion of All of Us Strangers. All right. Jim, if you wouldn't mind, I know this was on your list last week, and spoiler alert, this was on all of our lists last week. But you get the honor, question mark, of introducing this movie for anyone who's maybe unfamiliar with All of Us Strangers, because a lot of people saw that this was on my list and they're like, what the fuck movie is that? I've never even heard about it. Maybe you could just give a little bit of general setup and then tell us what you thought about the film, spoiler free, of course.
Yes, I will try to stick with spoilers. And yes, it is an honor to introduce this film. As I saw it just under the wire for my top 10, and it did factor in. And I'm not going to spoil that show for anybody, our rankings, but this one did drop in on all of our lists. This one is All of Us Strangers. It is written and directed by Andrew Haigh. Andrew, basically, he what's the word I'm looking for? Adapted this screenplay from a novel that he wrote by Taichi Yamada, which is kind of like a more like a horror kind of thing. This is not a horror movie. This is kind of more of a drama and a romance movie, and maybe a little bit of fantasy thrown in, but it's definitely not horror. But anyway, this one stars Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, Jamie Bell, and Claire Foy primarily. Really a small cast when it comes down to the speaking parts and the primary roles in this film, which I think factors into how good this movie is and contributes to its success. Let me give you the IMDb synopsis. It's not too spoilery because some of this stuff is probably in the trailer if you pay attention. A screenwriter played by Andrew Scott, his name is Adam, is drawn back to his childhood home and enters into a fledgling relationship with a mysterious neighbor as he then discovers his parents appear to be living just as they were on the day they died 30 years before. So, yes, so this is a story about Adam. He's kind of you get the impression that he's kind of a lonely, isolated screenwriter or a writer. And he's trying to, I think, write the story of his parents. At least that's what we see him at the beginning of the film. and he suddenly discovers that he's able to quote unquote visit his parents just as they were before they died when he was young. And so that's kind of the premise of this story. And Andrew Haigh has given us so many good films, right? He's given us the movie looking. He's given us the series looking, the movie Weekend, Lean on Pete, which was one that I really loved, 45 Years with Charlotte Rampling, and then this one, All of Us Strangers. And by the way, we talk about South by Southwest. I didn't know this, but Weekend premiered at South by Southwest in 2011, which might have been,
Oh,
was that the year before we started
it
going?
was. Yeah, because the
Yeah.
podcast started in 2012.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it Weekend premiered at South by Southwest and won the audience award there that year. I discovered that just today as I was kind of doing a bit of research. But yeah, we saw this movie probably a couple of weeks ago, and as soon as it was available here in our area, and I gotta say, this movie just knocked me the hell out. Like um, it's going to be difficult to talk about this movie. I'll just say that I really loved it. I'm still thinking about it almost every day since we've seen it. Certain scenes and lines from the film have stayed with me. This is an LGBT film, I would say, but it's not. It's not primarily pushing LGBT initiatives or issues. This is really a human story. I think almost anybody um, can relate to this in terms of like being able to go back and visit your parents when they were very young, and before maybe they're still around, maybe they're not, but when they were young, like your age, it's kind of a magical thing that Andrew Haigh explores in here, and I think the script is really great. Everyone here, I mean, Adam Scott is like Andrew Scott, sorry, is fantastic in this, right? We've seen him, and I didn't see him in Fleabag. I heard he was great. I didn't really see him in Normal People, and I heard he was. I'm sorry, no, he wasn't in Normal People, but I did see him in the Sherlock Holmes series that came out with Benedict Cumberbatch several years ago. He played Moriarty, but here, man, he's so good, as is the rest of the cast. Yeah, I loved it. I would say this is a firm, like, absolute recommend for people to go see. This one slipped under the radar for awards somehow, and we don't have to get into that, but it's certainly worth seeing as much as any other film from
All
last
right.
year.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that setup. We appreciate that, Jim. And FYI, we have a comment from listener Paul, very handsome bear from Palm Springs, California. And Paul says, All of Us Strangers is very good, but you have to like Andrew Haigh's style. He always picks the perfect music for his scenes, though. So I have a feeling music may be part of the conversation as we get into spoilers. We'll see. But Paul, thank you so much for the comment. We appreciate you. Hey, Will, how about you? Briefly, of course, because we want to save the bulk of our time for spoilers. What are your initial thoughts on this film? How did it hit for you? Was it impactful? Tell us.
It hit very hard. This is one that when I saw this one, I had a chance to sort of go outside on the patio, because the theater I was seeing it at was the second story theater where they have a little Violet Crown. I saw this.
Oh,
at
wow.
Violet Crown. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
yes.
a blast from the past.
Yeah, so a lot of the they've been doing a lot of the press and promo screenings out there lately, which is nice, because then you walk out on that little balcony afterwards and just have a moment to just decompress with the film. And this is a great film to have that moment with and to decompress with. I enjoy Andrew Haigh's style, although I haven't loved all of his works, just to be kind of fully transparent. Looking was not for me. I bounced off of that one pretty hard. It's okay. Not all things are for all people, but 45 Years was the one that really captured me on what he can do, and just sort of the way that he's able to drive the tiniest, slightest, like, needle through a movie and make it hit like a sledgehammer at the other side of it. That's his style, is being able to build big moments off of moments that aren't necessarily played for melodrama. Here, I think this one gives 45 Years a strong run for its money as my favorite Andrew Haigh film. And I think that's partially because of something that you had mentioned before, Jim. There's a magical realism element to this, and we'll talk more about where that comes from. There's also this idea of closure that I think is so important. And, I know you had mentioned before that this is a universal story, and I think it is. But I also want to say that I think there's something very specifically about the queer experience, in that a lot of us as just queer people don't get a chance to have the coming out stories that we want, the closure that we want. We have to go through life sort of wishing that certain key moments at certain stages in our life were different than they are. That's a universal statement. Everyone experiences that, but we often have to experience that very specifically with our sexuality and our relationship to our families and to our loved ones and such. So I think that this is one of those movies that does, I think anyone can watch this, anyone can enjoy it, but I think queer audiences will find a specific amount of I don't know, something to latch onto. Both all four, there's four performances in this that you really have to worry about. And I really want to look at the two leads. Paul Mescal was fantastic. Loved him in After Sun. Loved seeing him here again. He is now the last two movies he's done have been absolute bangers. Put him in whatever, I'll see it. And I have less experience, honestly, with Andrew Scott. I didn't really watch Fleabag. I honestly, I bounced off of Sherlock too. It was not for me. But I know he's been in some other things in some different roles that I've seen. I just don't really remember what he did in 1917. I don't remember kind of what he did in Pride, some of this different movie, Spectre. He's been in these movies, but this movie put him on the map for me. He is now okay, noted, got to see more from him, because this specifically, his performance has to carry a shit ton of emotional weight all the way through, and he does it without dropping a single plate. So I strongly recommend this one. I don't care who you are. The music slaps, the style slaps, the performances are all great. And you're going to find something that you can relate to, queer or not.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well. I don't know that I have a lot extra to heap on to the praise that's already been heaped on. And I know we want to talk pretty heavily in spoilers, I think. So I will just very quickly say, totally co-signed on how fantastic this movie is. Jim, you're absolutely right. I think it's universally accessible. But Will, you're also absolutely right in that this, as queer media goes, I think is an incredibly important piece of art and an important commentary on things like closure and how we handle grief and how we ensure that we're okay before we try to be a good partner, maybe to somebody else, and how important that is. So some pretty fantastic themes here. We've talked a lot about Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott so far. They are both fantastic. Really want to dig into that a little bit more. But I also want to mention Claire Foy and Jamie Bell as the parents of the Adam character, the Andrew Scott character. Man, they were just fantastic in so many different ways. It's weird to think of meeting your parents, when they're in their mid 30s or however old they're supposed to be in this film. And I was like, this could be kind of janky. This could be kind of weird. I don't know. But it ended up really working for me. And I think their performances are what sold that. Of course, Claire Foy, I've had some exposure to her from The Crown and the work that she did in the early seasons of that show. And, Jamie Bell's been in a ton of stuff at this point. So it's great to see both of them pop up. I kind of figured, four main characters, but the parents are going to be kind of the secondary, tertiary, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like this is really like a four-person ensemble play almost. It's kind of the vibe it gives me, and I absolutely love it. Will, you had mentioned 45 years. Jim, you mentioned Weekend. Looking is kind of this weird thing. It wasn't for everybody. I enjoyed it a lot, but like, I don't know. It could have been better. I think it wasn't as accessible as I think Andrew Haig's films have been. And I feel like this one really is just to call back to a comment I made last week on our top 10 show. I feel like All of Us Strangers is like the love child of 45 years and Weekends. And some really cool things happen as themes from both kind of mashed together. And it's fucking awesome. It's so good. So I'm really excited that we're talking about this. Jim, Will, if you're ready, I'd say let's just go on into spoilers and use as much of that time as we can to widen this discussion. What do you think?
100% agreed. This is one that the takeaway from this point in the review for anyone listening is we are all big fans of this. This is a movie that we all, had good things to say about in our last episode, and say that this is like a must watch, whether it be theatrical, whether it be waiting for it to stream, depending on where you live. So we don't want to spoil anything, and we don't want to go into too many details because this movie is best left unraveled. So I fully agree, Brad. This is that time.
Yeah. And I mean, this is like exactly the kind of movie that I'd like to promote or champion at the movies right now, because we talk about the cinema is dying out, blah 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 blah, superhero, whatever. I mean, this is the kind of movie that we should be championing, right? Especially for me, I go to the movies to feel things, and this is definitely a feel movie. And I felt this one pretty strongly.
Absolutely. It's my barometer for movies too. How much do they make me feel? How many different emotions do they make me feel? And this one just hit so many of those different emotions. I felt like the entire emotion cast from Inside Out was engaged with this film. And that's the mark of a really good movie for me. So let's do it. Spoilers for Andrew Haig's All of Us Strangers are incoming. This is the part where I ramble a little bit to give you a chance to hit the pause button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you are watching or listening live, we are doing a plug section this episode. Come on back in about 25 minutes, and we're going to put some things on your radar that we love, that we think you might love as well, or skip forward using the time index on the recording of the show as needed. But don't forget to come back after you've seen All of Us Strangers and listen to the spoilery part of the show. I think we're going to have some good discussion. So I clocked myself at 47 seconds of talking. Hopefully that was enough time for people to step away or do what they need to do. Spoilers are officially fair game. And I'd like to start with Paul's comment about the music. Jim, you had called out last week that the needle drops in this movie were fantastic. And I'd love to maybe revisit that, expand on that a little bit. What did y'all think about the music here? How did it work for you?
I thought it was great. I mean, I will say if 80s pop slash, alternative was your kind of your jam growing up, or, things like, Soft Cell or Pet Shop Boys or Frankie Goes to Hollywood, kind of the stuff that, you could imagine a young gay man or gay kid growing up would be listening to. That's the soundtrack of this movie. And the themes of the movie and the choice of music seem to really mesh together so well. Babe, I don't know if you bought or picked up any of the soundtrack songs. It's not really a promoted soundtrack for this, but there are some tracks.
So here's the problem. And Will, I want to hear your thoughts next, so I'm not trying to preempt you. I'm just responding to Jim real quick. I haven't been able to find a soundtrack for this on Apple Music as like a soundtrack from the movie where everything's collected. So I had to make a playlist and look up each and every song that was in the film and make a playlist into a soundtrack for me. I haven't looked at Spotify. I don't really use Spotify, so maybe it's there. I don't know if an official soundtrack was released, but I may not have been able to buy the soundtrack, Jim, but I put one together. If that
you put one together and picked up the songs,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, the needle drops are great, right? Like, and they are. I think one of the problems with needle drops in movies is that they can be used to be too literal, too on the nose, or too discordant. I go back to the first Suicide Squad movie from however many years ago, where every single one of those needle drops was only used because there was like one line in the song that maybe matched what was happening on screen, but they didn't like tonally or emotionally match what was happening in the scene. Whereas everything here felt like it was of a time. It felt like it was of a specific flavor. These were intentional choices that really matched the mood and also had a carry through. There's a Frankie Goes to Hollywood song on here, The Power of Love, which is just absolutely stellar pick. And the places where it appears, I think, are some of my favorite scenes in the movie. In a movie full of amazing scenes. So yeah, I mean, these aren't just needle drops. These are intentional, well-placed needle drops.
Yeah, there's even a moment. Go ahead. There's even a moment in the film where the parents and Andrew or Adam are like gathered around the Christmas tree and they're decorating. They're singing. The dad puts on one of the songs and they all start singing to it. You know, it's not a musical or anything. It's just like they start singing it to each other, and that's a particular scene that was just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely agree. That's why I went out and made a soundtrack for myself. And what's interesting is like a lot of people in my life who are queer are like, "Oh my God, Brad, Pet Shop Boys, they're so amazing. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, so amazing." And I don't know, that music has never really resonated with me for whatever reason. It just, I don't know, the songs that I like, they haven't quite fit in with my taste, I guess. But after watching this movie and after the songs being used in the way that they were, am I a Pet Shop Boys fan now? Question mark.
Maybe.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood? Question mark. I think the answer is yes. I've actually been going back. I haven't had a ton of time over the last like week and a half or whatever since we saw this film, but I've started to kind of sample some of the like Apple Music has like a Pet Shop Boys Essentials playlist, and I've been going through some of those songs, and honestly, I haven't heard a lot of them, but it's been kind of an inroad for me into their music catalog, and so I've been enjoying discovering some new music as a result of this. So Andrew Haigh, thank you for expanding my musical tastes in addition to providing a really fucking awesome movie. Appreciate you.
I've got to say, Brad, I'm also kind of liking this new era where, because of this movie, it feels like there's this door that's opened up for sort of that 80s new wave adjacent pop that you've been able to kind of walk through that door. And at the same time, because of Hunger Games, we talked about this previously, some more country music and bluegrass and folk, that door is open too. So like, I feel like you've got an exciting 2024 like musical journey too. So I'm excited to see what that looks like for you.
Me too, for sure. I'm excited to see where movies can take me. And I think the contextualization of these needle drops in the film, for the specific songs, of course, are a huge reason why, right? They're like on ramps onto a highway. And I may have just missed the previous exits for whatever reason. Now I'm finding them. So
I think that was it. I think a lot of this music came out in years, like just before, right around the time you were born, basically. So you were kind of young to really get into, the cutting edge music of the time, if you will, right? And so that you're just now discovering some of this. Pet Shop Boys. Depeche Mode is another one you've been really recently getting into. And they're kind of fit in the same era, basically, as this music. So it's really cool. And to see it used in this movie in such a tasteful but not overdone way was just great. kind of
I've
odd.
got a DVD I need to send you or something like that. It's just like, and it came out in like 2000, so it's maybe missing a few more recent things, but was basically every music video put out by the Depeche Mode, and it's
Oh,
just like just put that thing on, and it's just like it's great. It's just great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that kind of going back to the film, like
Yep.
if the nice thing about movies like this is that if music is a locked door, certain movies can like be the key to unlocking that door, and this
Yeah.
does that so well. I also want to call attention to really some of the, and I mentioned a little bit of this in the pre spoiler section. We end up with like, this is a movie that's not a this is not a young queer coming out story, which I think there are a lot of, and they're important and they need to exist. This is a movie about, nor is this a movie about a person finding his sexuality late in life, because this is a person who has long since come out, at least in his own life. This is a person who is sort of bridging backwards that gap. This character never had that, this Adam character never had a mom, dad, I want to sit down and talk to you about my sexuality. He never had that ability to really understand whether or not they would accept him, whether or not they would still love him, whether or not there would be friction, whether or not it would shape the course of his life. So he's having to recontextualize that in the past. We see that through his writing, and we see that through these moments that he sort of plays out, like what if, what could have been, what would have happened if that had happened. And this is the part that I think is so incredibly poignant about this. This is a late stage coming out story told through the lens of a youthful coming of age story, where the queer character has the agency. This is the one where he's not being kind of whipped to and fro by external forces. There are, depending on how you contextualize what's happening in the movie, there may be some external forces, but he's sort of in the driver's seat of sorting through all of this stuff and making these things happen and making these conversations and making this closure that I think a lot of us long for. So
Yeah.
I think that is incredibly telling about one of the major needs of queer people, and that is the ability to know that our stories matter, and the ability to know that the path that we're on is one that we have agency over, and that we're able to do so with the acceptance and love of those people in our lives.
Yeah. And I think I think the way it's portrayed in this movie is just so beautiful, because I think we all, as we move on, move on in life and get a little bit older, I think we all have these regrets, right? And that we wish we could we've lost people in our lives at this point, right? We've lost, whether it's
Yeah.
parents or grandparents or friends or whatever. And we always have that, gee, I wish I could go back. You hear it all the time, right? I wish I could go back and tell this person something, I love them one more time, or whatever. And this movie kind of centers at least part of itself around that thought. And he's
Right.
going back, and he's able to have this time with his parents. And the way it's played by Andrew Scott and the way it's directed is genius, because when he's in these scenes with his parents, he's an adult, obviously. He's not acting like a child, but it's almost like there's a little childlike part of him that comes out, right? When he's talking to his mom, he's talking to her as an adult, but like, at one point he's got pajamas on and he climbs into bed and, curls up with them because he's having a rough night or whatever. And I just think that's so tender, but it never really crossed the line for me into like, oh my God, this is so fucking stupid. It, it really hits that emotional chord, and it all hinges on the performance of Andrew Scott, if you ask me, and the parents, which is great. And we'll get to the other relationship, I'm sure, in that's featured in this movie between Adam and Henry. But yeah, that relationship with his parents was just so well done.
Oh, absolutely. And the Adam character obviously is the central bridge here, right? Whether we're
Yes.
talking about the relationship with Harry or with Adam's parents, and then I mean, we're in spoilers, so this is okay. The brief little like Venn diagram, like crossover, right, between Adam, parents, and Harry, that we get, and it's just so fascinating to see the intersection, I think, of these relationships with Adam. Before the jump to spoilers, we were talking about some of the themes of this film. And Will, you had specifically called out closure as being one of the central pieces of this, right? And since we're on spoilers, we can just say it. You know, Adam's parents die, and it's Adam kind of having these like, I don't know if visions is the right word, but it's almost like he's working through the trauma of that in his head, right? Through like imagined conversations. Not only that, he's working through like his ability to be a partner for somebody by like working through this imagining of a relationship with Harry. We find out at the end of the film that the relationship with Harry never actually happened. At least that was my read, and we can talk more about that. But yeah, but it's I don't know, like as someone who has lost a parent, 14 years ago, as somebody who has had relationships that have flamed and burned out and not gone well. Thank goodness they didn't, because then, babe, we might have never met and gotten married. So, getting emotional. It's just one of those things where like the closure piece, Will, that you were speaking to is what allows you to be open to the good things that are hopefully going to come after that closure. Right. And so whether that's, you never get over the loss of somebody, but learning to live with the loss of somebody in a healthy way is what's going to make you a healthy partner for somebody else. And so for me, it's like, if I were to meet a young person, gay, trans, straight, whatever, again, universal messages here, but especially for folks who are struggling with their sexuality and struggling with coming out. And like, for me, this is like a required watch list item, because I just think it's so powerful in so many ways around those themes.
Right. And that's a good thought, babe. Like that Adam character is kind of the bridge, right? Because if you think about it, and we'll get into more about the Henry character, but like, Adam had trauma from when he was 12 years old, right? Both his parents died suddenly, horrifically in a car accident, and he lost them. And right at the time where he probably needed them most, right? Where he was figuring out his sexuality and struggling with that. And from that point on, apparently he just went inside. I mean, he had, from all accounts, he had a pretty lonely existence, right? And just kind of stopped his emotional growth kind of at that point when he was 12 years old. Likewise, Henry obviously had a need too, right? His need didn't center around a trauma like a car accident, but his need centered around like he was extremely lonely as well, right? Like desperately lonely, and just needed somebody in his life. He was adrift, and what Adam got from his visit with his parents, Henry got from his new relationship with Adam, right? So Adam helped Henry deal with some of that stuff. And we'll talk about how that kind of all went together, because it is kind of weird toward the end. But I just love the layers that this movie has. And like I said, this movie affected me deeply when I saw it, to the point of like trying to hold back, like open crying in the movie theater. And to this day, to talk about certain scenes 2 weeks later, still like, and scenes and themes from this movie makes me emotional. And I definitely want to see this again, because I think on a second viewing, it's going to bring out more layers that maybe we didn't notice, because we were trying to figure out, okay, are those his parents? What what's with Henry? What's going on? Now that you know all that, seeing it again, I think is going to be even more compelling, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we should probably start to pull the Band-Aid off of that, because we've been talking about this relationship with Harry quite a bit. So I mean, we find out early in the
Call him
film.
Henry the whole time. It's probably Harry, right?
It's Harry, but that's all right. You know,
It's okay.
It doesn't matter. He's
Hank,
dead.
Harry, Henry.
He doesn't know he's dead.
That's right.
No, we at the very beginning of this movie, you find out that both Adam and Harry are the two people that live in this sort of like abandoned.
It's an abandoned. Sorry, Will, you froze up a little bit. It's an abandoned
I froze.
high-rise
I'm letting
tenement.
it.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, my
Yeah.
screen flickered out for a second, so I was just waiting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's this abandoned, like, high-rise tenement apartment complex. They're the only two that live there. And early in the film, Harry comes over to see Adam, not because they know each other, but because they know they're the only one there. Paul Mescal plays Harry with this, like, I think when I was writing it up, I listed it as this chaotic, troubled, sort of like emotionally bruised, but sort of like under the surface type energy.
Really desperate. Yeah.
You can tell that there's something there. He's reaching out, and Adam initially brushes him off, and then later they connect and they start to form this relationship where both people heal from one another's heals each other's trauma. At the end of the film, we find out that this was also an imagined relationship, because we find out that after Harry visited that night and was rebuffed initially and went back to his room, he died. There was no follow-up relationship. There was no interaction. It was this one brief moment. And I think there's something about that too that fits into this overall theme, right? Of us wishing we could rewrite or kind of like have more agency or have more of a way of controlling a specific thing that happened to us. Sometimes it's a broad part of our youth and our childhood and the relationship we have with the loved ones. Sometimes it's a mistake made with a stranger that had consequences that you weren't aware of, whether it be something small, you say something out of place, or whether it be something kind of big, like you ignore a sign that results in something more serious. All of those things sort of play out in the way that Adam sees this world and kind of rewrites this world. And I've seen some two different like readings of this, and I think both are valid if you go down this route. I guess three. There's the route of this is Adam as a writer, because we do see him writing up the stories of this, going through this thought process in his mind, figuring out whether or not this is or is not, and sort of recontextualizing things in his imagination. Or this is a story where Adam is actually experiencing these interactions with the ghosts of his parents and with the ghost of this person that he prolonged. And then the third one is I've heard that, but Adam was dead the whole time as well. And so this is him connecting his ghost. And I think it's important to discuss all those three things. And I'd be interested in hearing where y'all land. But I also want to preface it by saying that the exact outcome of that, I think, doesn't matter. This is a vibe movie. And when I say a vibe movies are things where the emotional context and the emotional feel that you get from a scene is more important than like the, kind of the secret lore
plot
behind
narrative
what is happening, the plot narrative stuff. So I think it's important. We're all going to have different takes on what that lore and those things are going to be. And those are super valid and super important. But also at the end of the day, the important part is that emotional like click. And this movie really does that. So, so I want to hear ghosts. Or is he rewriting the past in his head? Where do you guys land?
I very much think he is rewriting the past in his head as a trauma dealing mechanism. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why this resonates so much for me. I am a huge proponent for therapy. I think therapy is amazing. I think a lot of people could probably benefit a lot from therapy. And all of that is lead up to say that I benefit a lot from therapy. And some of the things that I've been working on, with my therapist over the years is like how to try and heal past traumas by recontextualizing certain things in my brain. For instance, Will, we've been talking about closure, right? My mom passed away 14 years ago. Unfortunately, even though, well, I don't want to get into a big long thing, but like there were some things that like went unsaid. There were some things that didn't get dealt with, and like even dealt with in like a positive way. And so one of the things my therapist has had me do is think about theoretical conversations I might have with my mom if she were alive today, or if I could go back then and have that conversation with her. And the focus is kind of on like what you know of your mom and how she communicated and how she felt. How might she respond to her if you had this conversation with her about like being in an open relationship, for instance, right? And so for me, watching the Adam character have these conversations with his parents felt very much like what I have done, putting in the work with therapy to try and help me with some of my trauma and my need for closure. So I don't think it was ghosts. I think he was just dealing with it in his head. But if it is a supernatural thing, this was based on a book that was more horror. And Sam White, friend of the show, Sammy D, also said that I guess there's a Japanese version of this movie that is much closer to the book, where it is very supernatural and is like a straight up horror movie. So, Jim, maybe it is ghosts. I don't know. This is my read, but that's kind of where I come down.
Yeah, and Will, you're right. I think I'm kind of in line with Brad, but like, I think it doesn't matter, like whether they're ghosts, right? He's not physically going somewhere and walking into a house. Yeah, I don't think, right? Like he may have walked by his house, but I don't think he's like going into a house and meeting people like ghosts are flying around the room, right? That's not what I think. It doesn't matter to me if they're ghosts or they're just his idea in his head of putting his, like you said, Brad, of like internal therapy of imagining, right, your parents there and having that interaction with them. Also, he's imagining the interaction with Harry. So I I think that's where I was with this film. But I'm starting to think now there's some things in here that I think there's a layer to be examined. Well, that third one you mentioned, where maybe Adam had died. We didn't see that on screen. We don't know. That's never said. But maybe he had died. And maybe that's why he's getting this closure now with his parents. And this building, quote unquote, that he's living in, it seems like it's just the two of them. That's very eerie. And, it seems kind of, it could be like some sort of purgatory, right? That they're in, those two people or those two souls, and they're getting to know each other. Also, there's some things in the movie, like there's also mentions about how Adam is always hot, right? And he's coughing, and there's a fire alarm at the beginning of the movie that happens, and there's always comments about how Harry says to Adam, like, "You're hot, you're coughing," and you're like, in my head, I'm redoing this over, and like, maybe he is dead, maybe he did die, we just didn't see it on screen. The other thing is, his parents, when Adam tells his parents about Harry, and they say, you need to go to him and take care of him and whatever, right? To give him closure as well, which was a really, really poignant scene in the movie, right? About like, how do they know about him? And it's just kind of, there could be a layer there to when I watch this movie, I'm going to go in with an open mind and see if it changes what I think of whether Adam really is dead. And the ending scene, well, the last 10 seconds or 20 seconds when he curls up next to Harry and the camera pulls away and they both appear like into a star, like into a dot in the sky. Does that maybe indicate that they are both just spirits, you know what I mean, that are now together? It's something to think about. This movie, I said, has a lot of potential layers. I don't think it spells out any one of them for you, and I think that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, and I think where I land is, again, like, all and none, right? Because I think that this, like I mentioned before, it's a vibes movie. I think the contextualization, the part that, the reimagined conversations, I think is an important part of this, because it has to
Mhm.
be, because that's how he goes through it. The idea of there being this sort of like, well, why can't we blend the two a little bit as well? Because what really is a ghost except for like being haunted by the dead, which is
Yeah,
what all of us are
an
when we
imagination of a character or a person.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're all to some degree or another haunted by the losses in our lives, right? So,
Mm.
when you define it that way, those ghosts are real. That's getting
Mhm.
outside of the actual tangible, like, Slimer coming through the wall, and like,
Right.
Ghostbusters popping in after him, type stuff. And and I resonate with this, both directions of it. We've all experienced loss, and we all have to sort of compartmentalize and contextualize what happens there. um, I've this last year I lost the guy that raised me, my grandfather.
Right.
Where last year, 2023.
Yeah. Yeah.
My grandfather, but he raised me, and that was a different circumstance. He was during at the end of COVID, but not because of it, because of other health issues. He was in a coma for a couple of months, wasn't expected to come out of it, did miraculously, and then we had an extra couple years with him. So
Yeah.
all fantastic stuff. But you still sort of like look, even for someone who's in their 80s when they pass, and you think like, well, did I spend enough time with them here? Did I spend enough time there? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? And then, I had the loss of my first husband, as well. And you think about
Right.
those same things, like what could have done different, or what could you have changed?
Right.
And those conversations are important, not because of dwelling on the past, because that's one thing, like that can be bad, but the idea more instead of using who you are now to help you understand your past so that you can carve a path forward.
Mm.
Um, so I struggle with like falling too far into the ghost path of this myself, because I think it's compelling, and I think there is stuff in the film that
Mhm.
accounts for some of that stuff. But I think that it's very possible for, and I don't think this is you, Jim, but I think there is a type of viewer who could get so hyper fixated on
Oh
those
no.
details that they miss some of the more like emotional
Mhm.
contextual stuff instead.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I know that's not you. I know
Yeah.
that's not you, but I know there is that viewer out
I
there.
I think at the end of the day, though, this is what is so fucking amazing about art. Whether you think it's ghosts, whether you think it's, internalized conversations, whatever you think it is, that he died and he's in the afterlife. I think it gives us an incredible vehicle to talk about things that we don't talk about with each other in general
Mm.
enough, right? And I love that this movie is sparking these conversations. The conversations I'm seeing online about this aren't were they ghosts the whole time. The conversations that I'm seeing are, holy shit, I have trauma just like him, and I really need to address that.
This
What?
movie gave me trauma.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right, Brad. Like the converse. That's what I meant by layers. There's levels of this movie, and I think there's one knock that I have against this movie, and I don't know that it's the movie's fault or the viewer's fault. Maybe neither. But I think some viewers, as you mentioned, Will, can go into this movie and they get so caught up in the details of what the movie is presenting them. Like, okay, well, how can he see this person if this person is in the room? And you know what I mean? Like they get so caught up in the mystery that this movie kind of presents that they miss the emotional resonance of what's really happening. And I could see that. I can see that people walking out and say, "Oh, this was boring. Nothing happened. Blah blah blah." Bunch of people talking. I can totally see that happening. I feel bad that other people maybe don't get the wallop that I got from it.
Mhm.
I just know that it totally worked on me.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's pretty incredible that it did, Jim.
Yeah.
I do want to say, just real quick, being respectful of everyone's time, we've kind of reached that point where we normally go to plugs. but it also kind of feels like there's a lot of unplumbed depths here. Are y'all good with packing on a little extra time if there's more you want to talk about, or are you ready to
Sure.
go to plugs?
I think so, with the idea of I don't know that I have a ton else to say because
Yeah.
at a certain point when I love every part of a movie, it
Mm.
becomes hard to keep talking about the movie because it's just like, go
Right.
see this movie, it's great.
Yeah.
But to that point, like, yeah, if we've got more, I say we go for it.
Okay. What else do
Uh,
we want to unpack?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, babe. It sounds like you might have had some stuff that maybe you weren't able to quite get out while I was
Yeah.
jabbering, at least.
First of all, you were not jabbering. You were talking about some pretty fucking incredible stuff, and I appreciate you a lot. I think for me, it's the relationship question mark with Harry that my brain is like, even last night, laying in bed a week and a half after I saw this movie, my brain is trying to like cogitate and figure this out. To me, it seemed like Harry came to the door with the bottle of alcohol. Adam turns him away. And then Harry ends up running into him again. They have this whole relationship, but then like we see him again, like dead on the bed, decomposing
the
with an
end.
empty bottle of alcohol at the end. But then there's this like conversation that happens with his ghost or imagining or whatever afterward. And I'm still trying to figure out, like, did he actually go there and find a dead body? Is this all in his head? Could Harry still be alive in his apartment and Adam was just imagining that he found his dead? Like, I'm not totally sure. I choose to believe that he went to try and find Harry and found his dead body, and now he's trying to work through that trauma. But I'm not completely sure. And I went to Reddit to try to figure it out. And sometimes Reddit is a blessing, sometimes Reddit is a curse. And even Reddit is really divided on whether like Harry was actually dead or not, or if everything was imagined, or
Adam's dead even. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I think I'm trying to come to terms with like whether Harry is dead or not. I think the work that Adam was putting in his head and kind of going through these imagined question mark conversations is a really interesting look at how you can like try to take trauma that you have or maybe have been affected by, and try to put your best foot forward and move on by tackling it directly. Adam is not a perfect character, and I think Adam struggled there, but I just think it's really neat that like a week and a half later, I still can't fucking decide what happened, but maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about it from this perspective too. One of the things that we see from Adam is he is I have to be careful I use this word because it's not the right word, like an elder gay. And what I mean by that, he's not a young gay. He's not, obviously there are people older than him. The
Maybe more
actors.
grounded.
Yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is like his specific age. The actor's 47. He is not a young queer person. He is an older queer person. And because of that, there are certain things that are part of the elder gay or, middle-aged queer experience that involves the loss of people, to suicide, to the AIDS crisis, to disenfranchisement, just all of that stuff in general. So I think that you can look at this also not necessarily as a direct like AIDS metaphor or suicide metaphor or any of those types of things, but I think the important part is there is something to the pain that you experience as a queer man of that age, knowing that there are people in your life that you've lost that maybe you only knew for a moment, who flickered out before you had a chance to really do something for them. Or maybe you could have said something different to keep them here, been that motivational person that saved their life if you knew what to say at that particular time. That doesn't necessarily, again, I don't think that that's necessarily literally what's happening, but I think, again, going back to that vibe, that emotional, that like that metaphorical point, I think that's a big part of it. So that's part of also why I, in the previous part, we talked about ghosts, and I have a hard time going too far directly down the ghost path myself, because I lose a little bit of just some of that more metaphorical approach that we see here. And so that's how I saw their relationship too, is really just blossoming from that moment of someone identifying what could I have done
Yeah.
differently, or what should I have done differently, that I think a lot of us have, or do know how to, or
Yeah.
have
Mhm.
experienced, or
I- Yeah. I'm going to say for the record, when I say ghosts, I mean it not in the horror movie sense. I mean it in the ghost, like this is a person you're seeing in your mind, right?
Oh,
oh yeah.
Yeah,
not like an actual spirit of
not
a
like an
person visiting.
apparition floating
Yeah.
around the room. That's what I mean. This is when I say
Oh,
ghosts,
okay.
it's the person's essence that lives in your head, right?
I
You know
think
what I
I
mean?
misunderstood because I
Yeah.
thought you meant like the spirits of his parents were coming back to talk to him, or Harry's spirit
Not
was like
physically, but yeah.
lingering to
But
after he died.
but
Yeah.
but I mean the spirits and the souls of people that you knew that are no longer with us live with you inside you. Like all the like that's I think that's part of what this movie's saying. It's like those spirits and souls kind of live with you in your head. That's how you can talk to your parent that you lost and you want to talk to again, or you can imagine talking to them, right?
Mhm.
You're not physically talking to them, but you're maybe in your dreams, maybe in your daydreams, or just contemplative moments.
Mhm.
You're pulling up their image in your mind and you're talking with them, right? I
Okay,
mean, that's
Mufasa, are you saying that
right.
all the kings of the past like live in you? Yeah,
Kind
Yeah,
of, I guess.
I
I get you. I'm sorry.
That's what I'm thinking.
yeah, I get that. I think for me, I look at it a little differently because, like, I hate to keep going back to my mom, but like that's the
Yeah.
biggest trauma in my life. I don't feel like her spirit or her essence or her ghost or whatever you want to call it lives in my heart or my soul. I feel like the memories of her and who she was
Hmm.
definitely live on in me. And I think the way she impacted me and maybe helped shape me live on in me. But I don't know that, like, when I think about having a conversation with my mom about something we didn't get to talk about, I don't look at it through the lens of like I'm talking to her like spirit or essence. For me, it's like, I'm remembering who she was and trying to apply that to new
Yeah.
situations and new
Uh-huh.
conversations.
Yeah, it's an area that's definitely worth talking about, right? Because you have your memories, which are actual things that you remember that happened, right? They're concrete. These happened. They live in my head. But now I'm taking those memories and I'm forming another image of that person doing something else or talking to me in a different way or responding to some new information that I'm trying to give them and imagining what they would say. I totally see that. One of the things I want to say is I talked about a rewatch of this movie. I didn't get to rewatch it, but when I went to see Zone of Interest last weekend, I got there really early, so I snuck into another auditorium, and they were just starting this movie, and it was a scene where Harry comes to the door of Adam in his flat, and I gotta say, on first viewing, you're like, okay, here's this guy. He wants to hook up. He seems friendly enough and whatever. And Adam like shuts the door on him. But that scene plays so differently once you've seen the movie. It's very the desperation in Harry, uh, beautifully portrayed by Paul Mescal, by the way, is like you can feel it, right? It's like you're willing Adam, like, let him in, let him in. You need to let him in. Just open the door, let him in. But of course, Adam doesn't, and it's tragic. Like it is a tragic scene in the movie, and you don't get the tragedy, of course, when you watch it the first time until the end of the movie. But now, when you watch it, knowing how it ends up, it's really powerful.
And one note on that too, and I think this is something that someone listening to this review this far who hasn't seen the movie yet, I think would be important for us to spell out for them, or at least from my perspective. As much as we talk about like tragedy and loss and grief and dead people and all of that stuff, this movie ends on what I would consider a very emotionally uplifting is
Bright,
not the yeah, not the it's not the right word to say like
not bright
uplifting.
and
This is
happy. Yeah,
no, this is a movie that sort of says like, sort of looks at the tunnel through. This is a movie that really looks at all of those different questions, your life, what could have been, what should have been, what could be, and just sort of puts them in a package and says, okay, well, where do you go from now? Where do you go from here? And I think that there's something that's dimly optimistic about that. And I think that's what works so well. This movie could have been a fucking downer.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not. I left this movie feeling good.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times movies like this just get labeled as a sad movie, right? And therefore people are just not going to want to spend time. They want something uplifting. And I think this movie does uplift you in a certain way. I don't like it when people say, "Oh, that's a sad movie," because as I mentioned at the beginning, I go to movies to feel something. And if that's sadness, I'm okay with that. I think, and maybe I'm selfish in that I'm emotionally strong enough, I think, to be able to handle that in a movie. I may blubber all over the place, but it's not going to, destroy me past the moment. This movie does stay with me, but I think it's just a shame when movies are labeled sad movies and then people don't go to see them. That's
Right.
what I would like to see. Yeah.
Well, hopefully, if anyone listened through the spoiler section, hopefully we haven't ruined your experience. But that said, we did our best to protect you from that. But this movie is definitely still worth seeing, we feel, and we hope you get a chance to do that. Fellas, I know we have some other things that we love, and we want to maybe help other people love them as well. How do y'all feel about wrapping up this discussion and moving into some plugs?
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Plugs. Yes.
All right. Well, great conversation. We could probably talk about, this film for another 2 hours and still not be at the bottom of the barrel for things we want to discuss. But super great points. Thank you so much. We would normally end the show. It's been an hour and 6 minutes. We're long on the tooth. But plugs are a thing. But plugs absolutely have to
So let's get out those
go
plugs.
in. Exactly. So let's kick things off for our plug section. But plugs are the part of the show where we take things that we really love and put them on your radar, put them in front of you, whatever terminology you want to use, in the hopes that you'll check them out and possibly enjoy them as much as we do. So, Will, if you don't mind, go ahead and get us started. What is your butt plug for this week?
Yeah, so my butt plug is a movie that was not on my radar at all because I honestly just missed that it was released and existed and was a thing until the Oscar nominations came out. And there was a lead actress and supporting actress nominations for Annette Bening and for Jodie Foster for the movie Nyad, which is on Netflix. You can watch this movie right now, and I think you should. This is a good movie. It's not maybe like an emotionally like deep movie in terms of like kind of the well that you pull from. It's not what we just watched and what we just talked about in All of Us Stranger. The story is it's a real life sort of like biopic-y type story, but it's really about just one person doing something extraordinary. This is when Diana Nyad, at 60 years of age, sets out to do something that no one's ever done before, and that's swim from Cuba to Florida. Basically that 100 miles of open ocean there in one uninterrupted 50-something plus hour swim. Annette Bening plays Nyad, and she is amazing. She's Annette Bening, but this is an especially good role for her. Jodie Foster in the supporting role here is... I love Jodie Foster, and this is also one of my favorite performances by her. It is so fucking good. What I also loved about this movie is that, this is a movie where both of these are both queer women, queer women in their 60s who, this isn't a movie about their relationship. They're lifelong friends. They love each other, but in a like
Deep
at this
friendship,
point,
right?
we have that. Yeah, we are always going to be there for each other type way. And I think that that's great. This is a different type of queer representation movie as well. it's a great supporting performance by Reese Ifans, who I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's a guy you've seen show up in a bunch of different things. Like he was in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. He was the guy that played Doc Connors, the lizard. And he plays sort of like the ship's
The boat
navigator. Yeah, like navigator here, because it's, they're really focused on the entirety of the crew here. This is cool. This is really cool. Again, the movie itself isn't deep. I think it's solidly presented. It's uplifting, but what I'm recommending this for is sometimes different things bring a movie to the top of your mind, and sometimes it's just two absolutely amazing performances that you're just enraptured by, and that's what we got here. So I'd recommend it. It's on Netflix. It's called Nyad, Nyad. This is a great I saw someone refer to this as like the most mommy of mom movies, like the type of movie you can sit down with your mom and watch on movie night. So if you have movie night with your mom, put this to the top of the list.
There you go.
Good pick, Will.
I'll preface, I haven't seen Nyad yet, but speaking of Jodie Foster, we are currently loving the hell out of the new season of True Detective, and Jodie Foster is
the Foster Renaissance is happening.
Yeah, she is fucking on fire in that show, and I'm hungry for like all the things Jodie Foster right now. So I may have to put Nyad on my list to check out. Thanks for the
babe. I did when I was doing a scramble toward the end, between the end of the year and our top 10, I wanted to get that one in, and I one night I was sitting around the house. I'm like, I'm going to check this out. And I watched it, and it's really good. It sounds like it could, we've seen these like sports movies be like Lifetime movies. It's not that at all. It's a really legit, great character drama, character examination of Diana Nyad, who she's an interesting character, right? In real life, she was a sportscaster as well as like what do you call it? Elite athlete, right? A swimmer. And she's a little bit, just an interesting character. And Jodie Foster plays her coach and friend. And I really liked it as well, Will. It didn't make my top 20, barely, but it was definitely worth seeing.
Awesome.
Yeah, Brad, not saying that you're giving off mommy energy, but I do think that I know the types of movies that like kind of like click with you, and I think this one would be a movie that you'd enjoy.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely add that to my list. Will, thank you so much for your butt plug. Jim, how about for you this week? What butt plug are you inserting into this conversation?
Oh, yes, I am definitely inserting a butt plug. And, right in line with the theme of this, the movie we reviewed, this is another movie about a gay relationship. It has a gay relationship at its center. It's called, it's an Italian movie called Nuovo Olimpo. It's brand new this year. It's not an old Italian movie. It's a brand new movie about two 25-year-old guys who meet by chance at a movie theater that where gay men go to hook up. They fall madly in love and then are separated due to an unexpected event. And then for the next 30 years, they're trying to find each other again. It's, we've seen similar movies before. I really like this film for a lot of reasons. I think the story's good. It does slip into melodrama a little bit, as some Italian, I think it's got that Italian movie sensibility where, the drama kind of slips a little bit toward melodrama, but definitely worth seeing. It's called Nuovo Olimpo, which is the name of the movie theater, by the way, in the movie. But the two guys are really good. Really, if you're into like sort of in shape, dad bod, otter, hairy, handsome dudes, this is your type. Brad, because I sent you some screenshots from the movie. The sex scenes in this movie are insane for Netflix. This movie's on Netflix right now. I don't know if there's another movie on Netflix that has sex scenes as hot as these are. There's full frontal in here, hairy men.
Wait, what's it called? Be right back.
It's Nuovo Olimpo, and one of the dudes looks almost exactly like Zachary Quinto. So if you got a Zachary Quinto crush, this guy
There you
could be your surrogate. Yeah.
So, Jim, you mentioned the screenshots, and Will, I got to set this up for you. I am in a meeting with my boss and some other folks talking about super incredibly important fucking things. And I start getting a series of screenshots from Jim from this movie. And of course, Netflix won't let you take screenshots.
No, it
It
would-
like makes them, a blank
Black.
screen for,
Yeah.
whatever. So Jim is taking pictures of the screen with his phone. So like these screenshots are like 80s-esque. I mean, you can see like the striation lines of like the panel and the weird things that pop up.
Yeah.
But like there's just so much fucking hotness. Harry, dicks, dad bods, all the things that I love and enjoy. And I'm just like, fuck, this movie has got to be like on HBO or some, Showtime or something like. And then Jim's like, oh, by the way, this is on Netflix. And I'm like, what? Really? Netflix would have something like that on there? But apparently they do, allow that kind of content on Netflix. So
I
Jim,
never knew that.
I don't know that I'll go back and watch this. I mean, it sounds good. I don't know that I'll have time to go back and watch it. But based on the screenshots alone, if you're horny on a Tuesday night and need some material, I mean, this could fit the bill.
All the hot sex is in the first 30 minutes, so you can get that out of the way. And if you're not vibing with the movie, you could walk away.
Is it kind of like Pornhub where you watch the first 3 or 4 minutes and then like skip to the middle for 3 or 4 minutes and like get done what you need to get done, and maybe you go back to the video again someday, but you don't know?
I don't know about that because I didn't have that experience. Because the guys aren't really my physical type, but they are hot, and the sex scenes are definitely steamy and hot.
I don't think Brad's necessarily comparing the movie to itself. There, he's comparing it to the experience that you might get with other forms of media,
other forms of
yeah.
entertainment.
So is that? I guess that's what he's getting at. Is it sort of like you can kind of go through it and is this one of those movies that Brad could sit down and watch, like an hour and a half movie over however many, like 3 to 5 minute sittings?
It probably is. It probably would get the job done.
Okay.
Well, there you go. There you go. Nice. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your butt plug. Definitely sounds like a good one. For mine this week, I want to go back to a show that I watched on Netflix. So again, Netflix. A couple years ago, that was produced and heavily written by Kevin Smith. Of course, we all know Kevin Smith, very popular in our community. But this show was pretty divisive because it was a spiritual successor to a show I loved back when I was growing up in the 80s called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Kevin Smith basically created a continuation. It's very complicated. They don't have like the licensing rights from the original cartoon. They have rights from the toys. So they tried to like pick up the ball and run with it from like a blended perspective. And Masters of the Universe Revelation was received pretty well. A lot of people liked it. And also a lot of like incels on the internet hated it because He-Man was kind of sidelined for a little while. The story really focused on Teela and her journey and her agency, and people on the internet. Oh, it's about a woman. It sucks. I hate it. But Revelations did this really cool thing where like they tell her story and then He-Man comes back into it. It was awesome. By the time it ended, I was like, holy shit, I can't believe this is done. I'm so sad. And thankfully, we got word soon after that another season was coming. That was in 2021, y'all. The new season just hit in 2024. So it's been about 2.5 years since that first season came out. And holy shit, is it amazing. Some of the voice cast has changed. They've kind of retooled some things with their approach. But it is still just absolutely fantastic. And even if you're not a fan of the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, this show is really made so that like you can pick it up brand new to the franchise or the lore, watch it and enjoy it. In fact, a good friend of mine who is quite a bit younger than I am and has never seen He-Man before, he played a He-Man board game with me a few weeks ago. We had some friends over, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I want to learn more about these characters." So I told him about the Kevin Smith one, and oh, okay. I told him about the Kevin Smith thing that was on Netflix, and so he devoured it in like 2 days. And now he's watching the new season, and he's completely hooked. So I'm just throwing this out there. Whether you are a fan of the original cartoon, whether you're new to the property, it's some really incredible storytelling in the show. It's Masters of the Universe Revolution, available on Netflix right now. But do yourself a favor, watch Masters of the Universe Revelations before you do that, because it's a direct continuation.
Yeah, Revelations was amazing. I think that it's sometimes hard to retool something that worked before that probably wouldn't work as is today for a few different reasons. He-Man was a great film or series for its time, but there's definitely some things that, have aged better than others, right? And I think one of the nice things about this series, or let me rephrase, for Revelation, I haven't seen Revolution yet, but I'm excited for Revolution because Revelation really gave a lot of the rest of the cast a lot more agency. I think it balanced out a lot of this could have very easily been like a Beefy Bros doing Beefy Bros thing. And it doesn't feel that way. Everyone's beefy, but that's just because that's the design work. But Tila is, I think, the main character of it, really, in a lot of ways, right? So I think that's cool. I don't know. I'm excited to watch this. So thanks for I didn't know that it had come out. So thanks for flagging that, because I enjoyed Revelation, and so Revolution is going to be. Ooh, I've got a flight coming up soon, and then a lot of time just sort of like watching stuff on my iPad in the hotel room after long conference hours. So might be on the list.
Well, hope you enjoy it as much as I am. Will.
Yeah, I haven't been watching Revelation and Revolution as closely as you have, but I know you're also rewatching a lot of the old He-Man Masters of the Universe series along with it, and you're kind of mixing and matching, and I'm catching bits and pieces. And based on what I know about Masters of the Universe, these new shows are, to me, seem like there's just way more like intricate. It's almost like walking and then like running, 100-yard dash, basically. And those shows are just way more intricate in plot, and they're really like two different shows. And I'm glad you're enjoying them both.
Thank you, babe. Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. The original show obviously was for kids. These shows are for, adults who watched as kids or adults who enjoy complicated, mature storytelling. And so, obviously a bit of a different audience, but I know we have our ups and downs with Kevin Smith. He's a great filmmaker. Not everything from him lands. But I gotta love the guy for bringing back one of my favorite properties. Masters of the Universe Revolution has been trending as like the number 3 thing on Netflix since it came out like 10 days ago. So a lot of people seem to be enjoying it. I hope new people find their way to it. Cool. All right. Well, that about wraps us up for this week. In case anybody wants to chat about movies or whatever between now and our recording next week, let's let folks know how they can get in touch. Jim, how can people find you online?
I'm on Letterboxd under my username at JJPOutWest, and I'm also on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Thank you so much. And Will, how about you? How can people interact?
So check me out on Letterboxd, Instagram, TikTok. I'm at the Movie Bear. Look for me on Facebook. Just look for my name, William Lindis, there. And as always, I like it if you send me a message first so I know who you are.
That's a good policy, definitely. You can find me on Facebook. I'm the Brad Harris who likely has chub chaser, bear, wolf, otter, pup, whatever friends in common with you. But as Will mentioned, please send a message first so I know you're coming from the show and you're not some clever bot trying to steal my login information. You can also find me on Letterboxd. I am continuing to rate every movie that I see. I hit every one of them last year. I feel particularly proud of that. And we're keeping that going forward for this year, especially since it made it so easy to come up with my top 10 list. Will, that was a stroke of brilliance on your part last year in making that recommendation. So thank you for that. But you can find me on Letterboxd at Brad Pro. And oh my God, Will, listen, if you, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you're listening to the audio version of this show, go to the YouTube version at an hour and 24 minutes and 30 seconds. You got to see what Will just did on the screen. It was amazing. Go check it out. But yeah, folks, feel free to reach out, say hi. We will see you all next time. Thanks so much for supporting the show, and keep an eye out for details on our 500th episode coming up here in just a few weeks. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.